welcome.
A CTA train bridge tells the story of the South Side's development.
We spent the day speaking with community leaders, talking with residents.
On this 2-year anniversary, she's made campaign promises already.
This is, of course, in line with Mayor Lori Lightfoot's announcement today.
If you've ever been to this part of Division, you can't miss the giant Puerto Rican flag sculptures.
Tonight, I'll have a sneak peek on the new immersive Van Gogh exhibit.
One to watch out for, there is an effort to repeal an Illinois law.
Aldermen in support of the Lakeshore Drive name change have been chilly to the mayor's counterproposal.
Activists at tonight's gathering say, yes, this is all a start.
It's important for all of us to be out here in the streets.
So we'll have the very latest from here and on other demonstrations that could take place in the next few days.
Thank you so much for sharing with us.
So, with the added cost of piano lessons, Christmas gifts, and I can still afford to get health insurance? How?
Just ask getcoveredillinois.gov. You can connect with local navigators for free enrollment help to get quality coverage. And you might even qualify for financial help.
WTTW programming originates from the Renee Crown Public Media Center. It's time.
That's a party.
Your favorite WTTW programs are ready to battle it out to see who's number one.
You said I couldn't do romantic gestures.
You decide. Go to WTTW.com/viewers choice and vote now.
With your permission, of course, Reverend Mother.
We'll show you the weekly results until we get down to the top 2.
Why can't you just tell me?
Then tune in on Sunday, February 12th. To see who your number one is. It's the WTTW Viewers' Choice Bowl. Go online and vote for your champion now.
Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. On the show tonight, we talk with Mayor Lori Lightfoot about abolishing cash bail, housing migrants running for re-election, and much more.
For right now, we're on pause.
2023 was supposed to be when Illinois made a move to cashless bail. Why that still hasn't happened.
We're all here for him, and I'm just glad to see 2 different cities come together.
Fans rally to support Bills player Demar Hamlin after his collapse Monday Night Football. We talk with a cardiologist about his life-threatening injury.
A speaker has not been elected.
What you need to know about today's rocky vote for House Speaker and what it means for the new Congress.
Volunteers rescue a bald eagle despite challenging circumstances in Waukegan Harbor on New Year's Day.
Seeing things you wouldn't otherwise see in ways you wouldn't otherwise see them.
A Chicago company that's been a model for family businesses since 1950.
I have a plaque upstairs that says, "Always in my heart," and that's for my donor.
And a local woman gets a second chance with a life-saving organ transplant. We share her story. But first, some of today's top stories. Workers at Howard Brown Health Centers begin a 3-day strike to protest layoffs amid contract negotiations. 61 union workers, including clinical therapists, were notified they're being laid off as of last week. They're part of more than 400 employees who unionized over the summer and are negotiating their first contract. Howard Brown Health leadership says the layoffs will help address a $12 million revenue shortfall and ensure patients receive vital health care services. Howard Brown is a nonprofit with health clinics around the city focused on LGBTQ+ patients. Also has 3 thrift stores that help fund their services.
A new leader for the FBI's field office in Chicago. FBI Director Christopher Wray has named Robert Wes Wheeler Jr. as special agent in charge of the agency's Chicago office, replacing Emerson Bowie, who retired in August. Wheeler joined the FBI in 1999. Most recently, he's been working in the agency's Criminal Cyber Response and Services branch at FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C.
Legendary Chicago theater director, writer, and actor Frank Galati has died at the age of 79. Galati won 2 Tony Awards for his 1990 adaptation of The Grapes of Wrath, which debuted at Steppenwolf before moving to Broadway. He was also Oscar nominated for his screenplay for 1988's The Accidental Tourist. In 2012, Galati spoke with Chicago Tonight about adapting E.L. Doctorow's Civil War novel, The March, for the stage.
And my job has been primarily to find the play which is kind of hiding in the novel. And as soon as I really came to the conclusion that its dramatic nature was potentially playable, I started working on it around 2006.
In a statement, Steppenwolf Theater co-artistic directors Glenn Davis and Audrey Francis say, quote, Frank had a profound impact on Steppenwolf and all of us over the years. Frank always made others feel cared for, valued, and inspired in his ever-generous, joyful, and compassionate presence.
Coming up in the program, why Illinois' transition to cashless bail is on indefinite hold.
But up next, we sit down with Mayor Lori Lightfoot to talk about her re-election bid and much more, so please stay with us.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
The Illinois Supreme Court has put the end of cash bail on hold for now.
Some Woodlawn residents are not happy after it's reported the city is planning on using an old school for a migrant shelter.
And the mayoral race is well on its way. And joining us to talk about all of this and more is Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot. Mayor Lightfoot, good to see you. Welcome to our new studio for the first time.
And Happy New Year.
And Happy New Year to you and your family. As we just mentioned, the state Supreme Court has put a hold on the end of cash bail for now. Do you hope that they overturn that Kankakee County Court decision and eventually allow this law to go forward?
Well, look, I think that anyone of goodwill recognizes that we can't turn county jails into debtors' prisons. And unfortunately, we have a sad history with that here in Cook County. But we also can't have a patchwork of laws across the state. We need a uniform law. I'm glad the Supreme Court is weighing in. I hope they take the appeal on an expedited basis. But look, the bottom line here is we've got to keep pursuing the things that we know that work. And we've got to hold violent, dangerous people accountable. And that includes holding them pre-trial.
And at the same, you've been critical of judges and State's Attorney Kim Foxx for what you see as letting some of those folks back on the street. Is there a risk that ending cash bail could lead to more of that, more danger on the street?
Well, I think one of the important things that the legislature did and the governor signed into law is making sure that the community voice is back in the pretrial release decisions. Community safety has to be front and center. And I have been very critical of what I see is judges not taking community safety, not thinking about the victims and the witnesses, and really the legitimacy of the criminal justice system into consideration. There are too many violent people out in our community pre-trial. Of course, they're entitled to a presumption of innocence. That's sacrosanct in the U.S. Constitution. Of course, they should have their day in court. But our state law mandates that judges have to think about what is this person's role going to be in creating harm in our communities, and that has to be, in my view, front and center of the work that's being done, and the judges have to take that into consideration before they release someone. Are they a flight risk? Are they a danger to the community? That's got to be the two questions that must be answered. And when you see someone with a long criminal history who's now accused of committing another violent crime, that should get every single judge making those pretrial release decisions pause, and in many instances, they should be detained pretrial.
Mayor, as we mentioned, a shuttered Chicago Public Schools building at 64th Street and University Avenue in Woodlawn set to become a temporary shelter for some of the immigrants who have been bused here from Texas. But local alderperson Jeanette Taylor, she's expressed some concerns about this. Why do you believe this is the right location for a shelter, given the local alderperson's opposition?
Well, first and foremost, we have been engaging with the alderwoman and community stakeholders, and we're going to continue that engagement. We had a community forum with them last week. week where they raised, I think, a number of legitimate concerns. We're going to meet back with them again later this week to hopefully address those concerns. But fundamentally, we have to be a welcoming city by living our values every single day. We did not create this manufactured crisis. The governor of Texas did that. But if we're truly a welcoming city, we've got to make sure that we're taking care of these folks, that we're providing clothing, shelter, food, so they can get on their feet and be responsible and contributing members to our community. And it can't just be the responsibility of one community versus another. We've set up 11 emergency shelters since August 31st when the first buses arrived. We're also getting people from various countries in Africa, in Haiti, Nicaragua, and Cuba coming to Chicago because of what's happening on the ground in their home countries. If we're truly a welcoming city, if we're one where we say we're proud of our immigrant history, this is the time for us to step up. And it means everyone. This has got to be one of those all hands on decks moments. Obviously, we've got to do this in concert with the community, answer their questions and concerns, but we've got to find a way to move forward together.
Now, you're also asking the General Assembly for about $53.4 million to help care for the migrants after two state agencies, the Illinois Emergency Management Agency and IDHS, have said that their funds for this support would dry up at the end of the month. What happens if the state can't deliver more funds?
Well, look, I'm going to be optimistic and continue to work with the leadership in both chambers, work with the governor's office. The fact of the matter is the state and the county and Chicago have worked very well since this crisis came to our doorstep at the end of August. But the fact of the matter is this is something that no one anticipated, and it's going to require real resources for us to make good on the promise that we're a welcoming city. We've had briefings. We'll continue to have discussions with members of the General Assembly and the leadership team, but we must have more resources directly coming to Chicago. That's how we're funded at the federal level. We're asking for no different at the state level. 1,500
migrants still in the city's care. Has the city been able to get other municipalities or organizations to step up and help support those folks?
Well, look, that's something that we talk to the state about on a regular basis. Obviously, we've got to take care of what's happening, but we're certainly in conversation with our suburban neighbors about the challenges that we're seeing, talking to elected officials at that level. But we need to make sure that we're continuing to work well with the state, because if we're not just a welcoming city, we're a welcoming state.
Mayor Lightfoot, I want to get to this move to encrypt police communications, and really it's already happening right now. So folks that normally want to listen to the scanner and see what's happening real time, they won't be able to do it now. They have to wait 30 minutes. How does this comport with your vow to be more transparent, and especially to bring more transparency onto the CPD?
Well, my first priority is to make sure that we're leading on public safety. And what I saw over the course of that horrible last weekend in May, back in 2020, was that our inability and failure to encrypt radio communications compromise our ability to respond in the heat of an emergency. And then beyond that, unfortunately, what I learned was there are some people who are doing things to purposely disrupt the police and OEMC's, the call takers and the dispatchers' ability to communicate and respond effectively to people who are calling
Have there
in
been
crisis.
Specific incidents where that happened?
Yes, absolutely.
Outside of that one weekend, which was an extraordinary weekend.
Of course. We have people that routinely hold down the keys to block transmissions. We have people who are calling 10-1, which is police officers are trained. When a 10-1 is called, that means officer down, they got to rush to danger, only to find out it's a phony call. So these are real issues that we have seen over the years, and we've got to address that issue. What I've said is, let's continue the conversation. Let's figure out a way. But front and center, we have to put officer safety and public safety. I'm confident that we can reach a reasonable compromise.
So would that compromise include perhaps credentialed members of the media being able to listen to the scanner in real time?
Well, the devil's in the details. You tell me what's credentialed. In this environment where there's so many people that have blogs and this and that, how do we make that distinction? Again, we've got to have...
You credential folks to be at City Hall, perhaps something like that.
We do, but I don't want to be in a situation where somebody accuses the city of violating their First Amendment rights. A delay is going to happen. Let's figure out how we can get it done. We have a meeting scheduled to further the conversation. I'm open to it, but as I said, my bright lines are officer safety and public safety.
Mayor, the city ended the year down 14% in homicides from the year prior, but of course it is still much higher than it was pre-pandemic. What would you change about your public safety strategy in a second term?
Well, look, I think it's not just waiting till a second term. We're constantly evaluating what we need to do to continue to drive safety to every neighborhood. And I'm well aware that there are people in our city that simply just don't feel safe. My goal as mayor is to make sure that we're the safest big city in the country. Two areas that we're going to focus on in the short term as we start the process of implementing a strategic plan for 2023. Domestic violence. We saw an explosion of domestic violence, homicides, and shootings over the last 2 years. We've got to do a better job working with advocates to bring those numbers down. The other area where we're going to need the courts to help us is juvenile offenders. Again, we're seeing way too many kids involved in carjacking, violent, dangerous situations, using firearms. Those two areas alone, if we are able to work with the community, work with advocates to get and help the victims in those cases, help those kids who need an off-ramp, and we've got to have the courts involved in this conversation. If we can work on those two areas alone, we're going to see a significant drop in violence and danger in our city. But that's why I go out in community all the time. I was up on Devon this morning listening to community members, understanding what their pain points are, and making sure that we implement concrete steps to address the issues that they're seeing.
Mayor Lightfoot, there's no property tax increase in this year's budget, as you said, but some Chicago homeowners are seeing increases in their property tax bill by as much as 46%, depending on whether their neighborhood is gentrifying. Is there some sort of relief you might propose for them and renters that might see that trickle down to their monthly rents?
Well, look, people got sticker shock because they got a bill in December that then was due at the end of December. That's not enough time. So number one is we've got to look at ways that we can make sure that people have reasonable amounts of time to address these issues. But also fundamentally, we still have work to do in reforming the assessment system. You know, it's a zero-sum game. And when we see, for example, the Board of Review making big concessions to commercial properties, who bears the brunt of that? Residential homeowners. So we've got to fix that problem as well. We're looking at a number of different solutions. There have been some aldermen that have come forward to offer up some solutions, but we also want to make sure that every exemption that people are entitled to, that they're getting, because that will also structurally reduce their property tax bills.
What about using federal COVID-19 relief funds, as your challenger, Chuy Garcia, has proposed?
Well, look, that gives a short-term relief. It doesn't solve the structural problems of people's property tax bills being too high. So in other words, what he's proposing is, let's give you some money to pay you off now, but not address the structural problems. We've got to fundamentally do reforms that bring down the property tax rates and assessments for people to give them lasting relief. I'm about long-term solutions, not short-term things in the middle of an election cycle.
All right, that's where we'll have to leave it. Mayor Lori Lightfoot, thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to talking more as the campaign continues.
All right, thank you, folks. Like the new digs.
Appreciate it.
All right.
Up next, more on the delayed change to cash bail in Illinois. Stay with us.
How do we find resources we had no idea about?
The community seems to want us to be in this space.
There's plenty of potential to do that stuff and keep it within the neighborhood and keep it ours.
January 1st was to have been a big day in Illinois. The state was set to become the first in the nation to completely move to a cashless bail system for those accused of crimes. Instead, money bail remains in place. Amanda Vinicky joins us now with an explanation on why and what's ahead. And Amanda, the state Supreme Court stalled the change Why?
Yeah, Brandis, I was chilling the champagne on New Year's Eve early that evening, and that's when down came this decision from the Illinois Supreme Court. With less than 12 hours before cashless bail was to take effect, justices put it on hold indefinitely. They had been asked to take action by a couple of suburban state's attorneys, including Kane County's Jamie Mosser, who had requested the state's high court clarify what they should do on January 1st, given that days earlier, a Kankakee County judge had ruled the law known as the Pretrial Fairness Act unconstitutional, meaning that some 70 of Illinois' 102 counties, mainly those that had filed a lawsuit to stop the law from taking effect, were going to keep the current bail system, but another 32, including Cook and Lake counties, were planning to go forward with no money bail. Mosser says that would have been totally chaotic.
Understanding that this would create chaos throughout the state of Illinois to have defendants treated differently in each county and frankly in each city. Remember, Aurora has myself, DuPage County, Will County, and Kendall. Will and Kendall were in the litigation. DuPage and Kane were not because we were negotiators. So you could be arrested in the same city and be treated differently, and that's not fair.
Supreme Court justices agreed with that sentiment, writing that in order to maintain consistent pretrial procedures throughout Illinois, they would stay the Pretrial Fairness Act until they finished hearing an appeal of that Kankakee decision and until further order of this court.
I mean, obviously, we're very frustrated that there's a delay. We had hoped that this law would go into effect on January 1st. And the reason it's frustrating is because the underlying lawsuit is really quite frivolous. And was brought, at the last minute, at the 11th hour, with the purpose of delaying the implementation of the act.
Sarah Stout's organization is part of the coalition to end money bail. Now, despite frustration with the delay, she says she's confident the Supreme Court will reverse the lower court's ruling, paving the way for the Pretrial Fairness Act to take effect. That would mean no longer would those accused of non-civil crimes have an option to pay money to get out of jail. The law also lists some 10 categories of crimes in which a defendant is eligible to be kept in jail, and then makes it so that with certain crimes, defendants must be released, or in legal speak, the law creates non-detainable offenses.
So, for example, most Class 4 felonies are non-detainable. All drug possession cases are non-detainable. DUIs, until they become non-probationable or they cause great bodily harm or have some other factor, are non-detainable.
Take those driving under the influence cases. Mosser says an officer could arrest someone, take them to the police station and then to court. A judge could give the defendant conditions they're expected to keep as they wait trial, but like don't drink and don't go to a bar.
And then they're released. But it doesn't matter how much of a danger I think they are, I can't file a petition because they're not under one of those 10 categories of offenses that can be detained.
And Mosser says she supports a system that lets people pay their way out of jail, or that no longer lets people pay their way out of jail, that is, but she wants it done right, and she still does have concerns. She was in negotiations with legislators to help address states' attorneys' concerns, many of which she says they did in a follow-up bill that was signed into law last month. Still, Mosser says she has concerns still, for example, the creation of those non-detainable offenses.
Now, Amanda, earlier we heard from an advocate who seemed pretty sure that it's a matter of when, not if, the state moves to cashless bail.
Yeah, and actually, Brandis, I asked Sarah Stout that very question.
We're confident the Supreme Court is going to reverse the lower court's ruling and find the act constitutional in the long run.
Why that confidence?
Fundamentally because the legal arguments at play in the lower court are unserious.
For example, she says the suing state's attorneys misconstrued the definition of the word bail. Mosser, though, says while she could not be part of the lawsuit, her fellow state's attorneys made credible arguments. And she says the Kankakee County judge's ruling that there are separation of powers problems with the law, it's sound.
I agree that my colleagues had every legal justification to file the action that they did. I do have concerns about how this can go into effect with the way our Constitution is.
Monster says at this point, that's a decision up to the Illinois Supreme Court, and whatever justices do decide, she'll abide by it. Now, Stout says Illinois was ready January 1st for cashless bail and will be ready whenever a decision comes.
I think what we need to know is that we're really pretty close to the finish line, right? The law has been found, has gone through multiple legislative changes. It's survived one of the biggest misinformation campaigns that we could sort of imagine it having during the last election. And now we're in a final legal challenge.
Brandis, there is no timeline for when the Illinois Supreme Court will act, though justices have said that they want to take this up in an expeditious manner. Want to point out that we did, of course, just have an election, so the Supreme Court now has a 5-2 majority of Democrats, and the Safety Act, which is the broader criminal justice overhaul that contains the Pretrial Fairness Act, that was passed with only Democratic support.
Okay, a lot going on with this law, Amanda. Thank you.
It will continue to be so. Thank you.
And it will. And now to Paris Schutz and that frightening moment on Monday Night Football. Paris.
Thanks, Brandis. 24-year-old Buffalo Bills safety Demar Hamlin remains in critical condition at the University of Cincinnati Medical Center tonight. We've all seen or heard about the tragic incident in last night's NFL game where Hamlin made a tackle, got up, and then moments later collapsed onto the ground. Emergency crews administered CPR for a reported 9 minutes. Support for Hamlin has flooded social media platforms, and fans have been gathered outside U of C Medical Center. Our own Matt Masterson was at the game in Cincinnati Monday night, and he joins us now with more. Hey, Matt, folks around here know you're a big Bills fan, so you were at this game. Tell us what it was like to watch this unfold right in front of your eyes in real time.
Hey, Paris. It was definitely surprising to see. When the play happened, I don't think anyone in the stadium really grasped that there was a big injury. There wasn't this big collision where two people's heads hit or anything like that. It appeared he just fell over and maybe it hurt his leg or something like that. But it was evident very, very quickly when trainers were running out on the field from both sidelines and players were getting around him and getting very emotional that something very serious had gone wrong.
And give us a sense of the timeline. How long before a stretcher came out there, and then how long after that before the ambulance came out and crews performed CPR?
It seemed like it was probably seconds or maybe a minute or so before the stretcher and the backboard were out for him. And very quickly after that, the ambulance was going. Trainers had circled around him and players had come over to check on him, but players were sort of being pushed away as trainers were working on him. CPR started within a couple minutes and lasted for, it's been reported, 8 or 9 minutes that he underwent that before he was eventually loaded into the ambulance. But he was down on the field for what seemed like a very, very long time.
And the game was temporarily suspended. The players went to their locker rooms. What was the atmosphere like among fans in your section as that was happening?
It was definitely a stunned silence. This was obviously, a very, very big game late in the season. There was an electric atmosphere there for the start of the game between these two teams. Fans were very loud. It was very, very exciting. And then all of that just evaporated. As soon as this hit happened and as soon as people saw this man getting CPR in the field, Hamlin, down there for that long, it was just stunned silence. I think a lot of people were checking their phones to see if there were any updates they could get. There weren't a lot of announcements at the stadium for what was going on at the time. So everyone was just kind of watching and trying to find out what they could as quickly as possible.
And then it seemed like there was some jockeying back and forth. The coaches met each other. There's some reports that they were the ones that kind of spurred the NFL on to cancel this game entirely. What was the reaction when you got that message now that the game had been permanently suspended and it was just time to leave?
By that point, I think everyone knew that was the right decision. It had been about almost an hour or so before they actually announced that they had suspended the game permanently, but it was clear that the players were not going to be able to continue with that game. The fans, I don't think anyone that I saw wanted to see that game continue either. People were very emotional just watching it, and I don't think anyone can imagine the players actually trying to go back and try to continue this, let alone try to entertain a crowd with all those people. The atmosphere was obviously gone, and people were just mostly concerned that Hamlin was going to be okay.
Yes, certainly in a heated rivalry like that, good to see all fans kind of come together and say that this game just definitely can't continue. There are more important things in life right now. Matt Masterson, thanks very much for your story.
Thanks, Paris.
And now for some medical perspective on what might have caused Hamlin's cardiac arrest. We are joined by Dr. Marlon Everett, cardiologist and medical director of Advocate Trinity's Athletes Know CPR program. Dr. Everett, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So when you watch that video of Hamlin taking that hit, getting up and collapsing, What went through your mind?
Yeah, I mean, I knew it was some sort of rhythm problem. I mean, the way that his body just went so flaccid, and it would seem like it was potentially after the hit, but he stood up and then he became flaccid, and he just was lifeless essentially after that. I was concerned about a heart rhythm problem, heart rhythm abnormality at that point for sure.
And a lot of folks have talked about this issue of commotio cordis, where you get a blunt trauma to the heart at just the wrong time. Does it look like that's a plausible explanation for what could have happened?
It's definitely plausible. I mean, he's a world-class athlete. And for that to happen for somebody like this, it's either going to be most likely either commotio cordis, which is a blunt trauma at a vulnerable time that just leads to a heart rhythm issue that leads the heart to stop beating, and you subsequently have sudden cardiac arrest. Or it could be a predisposition or a predisposing condition that he had that is undiagnosed. But there's no way to know at this point. But ultimately, the result was sudden cardiac arrest.
Yeah, and that commotio cordis issue, I mean, there have been reports of baseball players when they get a ball right to their chest at the wrong time. I mean, how rare an event is that? Like, how rare is it that it would occur at the exact time that it would need to occur to cause that reaction?
Tremendously rare. I mean, just think how many football hits there are, how many times people get their chest hit in other sports, hockey and things like that. So you're talking, when we're hearing numbers such as 30 times a year total in the country. I don't know how many in the world, but it's tremendously rare. It just happened to be on national TV in Monday Night Football. I think that's why it's really come to light.
And there are a lot of reports that he was being administered CPR for 9 to 10 minutes. Is that a good sign, or could that also be an ominous sign that they couldn't get his heart revived and he couldn't get oxygen to his head?
Well, it depends on how you look. I mean, we hope that the medical professionals did adequate CPR. They were there on time. They were there quickly. They started CPR, hopefully pretty quickly, and they were able to do adequate compressions. You know, CPR has a couple functions to it. It needs to be very good compressions, and it needs to be somewhat fast. So I'm hoping that that's what happened, to hopefully be able to preserve his brain function and some of his other bodily functions.
How long or how quickly would they need to preserve that before it would be sort of danger for his brain even ever recovering?
Yeah, I mean, every minute counts, every second counts. But, you know, it's about a 10% chance of less survival every minute that you don't do CPR. So I think the key point in this is to ensure that everyone knows CPR and that it gets administered as quick as possible when you notice someone has had a cardiac arrest.
So perhaps in that 9 or 10 minutes, it wasn't that they couldn't get his heart started, but perhaps they just couldn't get him breathing on his own, so they had to keep administering it?
Yes, it could be that the heart didn't restart for a while. But remember, if they're doing adequate CPR, that is a heartbeat, essentially. And hopefully it was just nice, strong compressions. But we just don't know. And also in CPR, you really should be doing CPR continuously for the first few minutes anyway, before even checking for a pulse. So that's what I suspect actually happened, but we'll see.
And there are reports that he is intubated now, but recent reports that some of his breathing function seems to be returning on his own. So what has to happen over the next 24, 48 hours?
It's all a recovery time. It's all about letting his body relax. I don't know if they actually performed any sort of hypothermia protocol, which is cooling him just to allow the brain to relax for about 24 hours and then let it warm back up. But essentially over the first few days, we just allow you to keep your vital signs stable, allow you to relax. You have a breathing tube down, and we see if you recover neurologically. That's the objective now. I think now most likely that his body is recovered, but we have to see how he's going to do neurologically.
And is there any way to know how he is doing neurologically right now until more of that breathing function returns? They just don't have any idea at this point.
Well, it depends. No, we do trials where you can reduce the sedation and test him and see if he wakes up, see if he follows commands, those type of things. So we're hoping that, I don't know how much sedation he's on. And usually when people do have a breathing tube down, they are on some sedation because it's uncomfortable. But typically we do try and wean that off a little bit and then try and assess and see if he has any sort of neurologic function, if he's awake, alert, or follows commands.
And you would suspect that doctors are going to be doing this now and over the course of the next few days, then?
I think so. I think that they will ensure that his vital signs continue to stay stable, and then they will, over the next few days, continue to assess him neurologically.
All right. Dr. Everett, thanks so much.
Thanks so much.
Appreciate it. And now, Brandis, we go back to you.
Paris, thank you. Still to come on Chicago Tonight, we catch you up on today's vote for U.S. House Speaker and what it might mean for the new Congress. A look at the little Chicago company that's helped all kinds of businesses think big for more than 70 years. Volunteers rescue a bald eagle found floating in Waukegan Harbor in an unconventional way on New Year's Day. And a new outlook in the new year. A local woman gets a second chance with a life-saving organ transplant. We share her story. But first, some more of today's top stories. Chicago saw 695 homicides in 2022, according to the city's police department. That's a significant decrease compared to 2021, when 804 people were killed. But while the homicide rate has dropped, other types of crime have surged. Reported thefts have soared 56%, and the number of motor vehicle thefts have more than doubled to over 21,000 in 2022 amid a wave of carjackings. Energy giant Exelon has a new CEO. Calvin Butler officially took the helm today, replacing longtime CEO Chris Crane. Butler has served as Exelon's chief operating officer since October 2021 and was previously the CEO of Exelon Utilities. In a statement, the company says, quote, Calvin is relocating to Chicago, which is and will remain where Exelon's headquarters is located. That will be music to the ears of Chicago's corporate and political leaders after a number of high-profile businesses moved their headquarters out of the city last year. Dense fog has blanketed the Chicago area for much of the day, creating hazardous driving conditions. The National Weather Service issued a dense fog advisory this morning for north central and northeast Illinois and northwest Indiana. The advisory was extended and is now in effect until 9 p.m. Drivers are advised to slow down because of reduced visibility, use their headlights, and leave plenty of distance between vehicles ahead of them. And Mandy Fila and Daniel Ferguson made it official this morning as the first couple married in Cook County in 2023. They won a lottery of more than 100 couples vying for the first of the year wedding slot. The ceremony was officiated by Cook County Clerk Karen Yarbrough. It is the first time in 2 years that she's been able to conduct the ceremony in person. Paris, back to you.
Brandis, day one of the new congressional term has been filled with drama, dysfunction, and division, and that's in one political party. For the first time in a century, a speaker was not elected after the first round of balloting. In fact, the House adjourned after 3 rounds and no consensus. This as California Republican Kevin McCarthy has spent months, really years, jockeying for this position. All eyes are now on whether McCarthy can close the deal among his slim GOP majority. Joining us to unpack this are John Mark Hansen, professor of political science at the University of Chicago, and Lynn Sweet, Washington bureau chief for the Chicago Sun-Times. Thank you both for being here. John Mark Hansen, first I want to zoom way out. Beyond being third in line to the presidency, describe all that comes along with this role and why this vote today is pivotal.
Well, the Speaker of the House sets the agenda for the United States House of Representatives, and so it really controls the business that comes to the floor of the House of Representatives, controls a lot of the business before it comes to the floor, and so it's really where the Republican Party is going to offer its program.
And Lynn Sweet, Kevin McCarthy, for the last 2 years, it seems like he has been trying to curry favor with the sort of Trump wing of the GOP, going to visit Trump at Mar-a-Lago, talking about election conspiracy theories. How come it didn't seal the deal with that faction?
Because there's nothing that will make some of these members be for Kevin McCarthy, because they say they don't trust him. As you noted, by the way, we have one Illinois Republican, Representative Mary Miller, who is among the 20 Republicans, that's 20 as of the third vote, who didn't support McCarthy. I think it's also worth noting that most of that 20 are also election deniers. So you see there is a wing of the Republican Party in the House that really does not want anyone that seems to have any bit of the establishment stamp on them to be their leader, yet they only have enough members right now to disrupt, but not to create somebody who can be from their ranks.
And there were no defectors with these 3 votes. They kind of stuck to their guns as these votes went on. We mentioned this is the first time that someone was not elected speaker after the first ballot in a century. How unprecedented is this kind of discord? 94, 95, 96, when Newt Gingrich stepped down, there was some discord too.
That's right. So from the standpoint of the speakership, this hasn't happened in a very long time, but the Republicans actually have a history of kind of heating up their speakers and deposing their speakers. So we've not only had Newt Gingrich, who was deposed in 1998, followed then by Denny Hastert, who managed to get through a fairly long string as speaker, but then more recently John Boehner, and then finally Paul Ryan, who wasn't deposed, but who kind of quit in frustration, I think, more than anything else.
So this is kind of unprecedented, but disruption in the caucus is not unprecedented. As we mentioned, Lynn Sweet, all eyes now on McCarthy. What do you think he's doing right now? What are the discussions that are going on, and what's it going to be like tomorrow morning?
Well, he needs, it's not, they're meeting again at Wednesday at noon. I'm actually in the Capitol right now in the Senate press gallery. Just a small thing to note, by the way, the House cannot function without a speaker. All the members cannot be sworn in. So the other historic thing we have going on here is that we have no House of Representatives because you have no speaker. So this is a chaotic situation, to say the least. Now, there is a scenario that McCarthy just drops out. We had 3 votes today. You could try some more, but you know he knows how to count votes. You had in the last roll call on vote 3, you know, Democrats have stuck together, or 212 have been with the Congressman Hakeem
Jeffries from New York.
Jeffries, thank you. Okay, but you had these defectors, this group of 20. In fact, in the 2 previous votes, he had 19. So whatever the MAGA Republicans think that they could get by chasing McCarthy out, if they could get a better deal from anyone else when concessions have been made, maybe they just don't want McCarthy. Maybe it's an ever Kevin thing, but it's not clear who they want, because the other person who might be acceptable to them, Jim Jordan, the firebrand, says he doesn't want it. But it's a long time until noon tomorrow. People can change their minds, but you have to remember this is a balancing act. Somebody who could be acceptable to the MAGA Republicans is likely not to be acceptable to other Republicans, so we're right back where we started.
So might be a long sleepless night for some tonight. You know, covering City Hall, the dictum was the mayor never wanted to bring a vote to the floor unless they knew they had the votes. I think that applies to all levels of government. So this vote comes to the floor. McCarthy didn't have the votes 3 times. What does that portend for Republican governance in the House over the next 2 years?
Well, I think what it pretends is that whoever actually wins the speakership is going to probably rue the day that he won the speakership. It's going to be very, very difficult to manage this conference and to get things through and to do the kinds of things that need to be done.
And Lynn, you wanted to jump in here.
One other quick point here. I know the rule is if you're a leader, you never call a vote unless you can win it. McCarthy had no choice today. You have to have a speaker elected to have a House. We don't have a House as I speak right now. So his hand was forced on this one. And yes, his life may be a terrible life as Speaker, because if the concession he was prepared to make, where one member can, in a sense, call a vote to question his leadership, he's going to be walking on real thin ice. He only has a few members to spare, just like Nancy Pelosi only had the majority by a few members, but Pelosi had a grip and an ability to unify her caucus.
Right, she was able to pass a lot of legislation with different factions of the Democratic Party not always seeing eye to eye. So no one seems to be blinking here, John. Mark Hansen, another scenario talked about is if some Democrats, moderate Democrats, cross over and find some coalition candidate, do you see any likelihood of that happening?
I don't see much likelihood at all. We've reached a state in U.S. politics where the parties are very polarized. That's true both of the people who are in Washington, and it's true of the people who are the voters who vote for Republicans and Democrats. And I think the price would just be too high to pay, even for a moderate Democrat, to support a Republican candidate for Speaker, or for that matter, Republican moderates to support a Democratic candidate for Speaker.
All right, John Mark Hanson, look in your crystal ball. When you wake up tomorrow, what do you think? How do you think this all gets resolved?
I'm not sure I know, but in 1859, one of the previous instances, it took 8 weeks and 44 votes to elect a Speaker, and they elected a freshman representative from New Jersey, a Republican. So I think the next Speaker is George Santos.
George Santos. We'll have to see if that. Lynn Sweet, is it going to take 8 weeks to get a Speaker here?
Oh, I don't want to predict a timeline, but you have a point, Professor, and that is, if this really seems a stalemate, then a candidate who is yet unnamed to us right now may emerge as the compromise.
All right, a lot of intrigue in Washington, and we thank you both for joining us. Lynn Sweet, John Mark Hanson, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Up next, a family business that works at a very small scale. But first, we take a look at the weather.
They say seeing is believing, and that's especially true when it comes to model making. Material models can make complex ideas easier to understand, help prove concepts, and even make history come to life. A local company has been turning ideas into reality via model making for over 70 years, and you have almost certainly seen their work in some of Chicago's institutions. Producer Erica Gunderson has details.
We made the prototype for the pocket fisherman.
Whether it's turning an idea into reality.
On Popio, yeah, we did over 10 projects for him.
Or setting a scaled-down schooner to sea.
That you're convincing the person that's looking at it that it's the real thing, shrunk.
Revealing what was invisible.
Bolita has a clear skin, and you can see all their organs, and they would light up.
No matter how they tried, they couldn't find an actual person to do the same thing.
Or demystifying industry.
So every municipality that bought a water tower from Chicago Bridge and Iron got a model builder's cutout so that you could put it in the front office at the municipality, and shows how the water tower works.
Model Builders Inc.'s business is in the details. The Chicago-based company has created models and prototypes of all kinds since 1950. As a teenager, MBI founder Bill Chaffee created prize-winning aircraft models. At age 21, his original design for a balsa wood glider sold thousands. After stints working for industrial giants like Chrysler and General Motors, Chaffee hung out his own shingle and soon developed a reputation for his precision work, creating all manner of models. Chaffee's children, Clark, Ellen, and Hal, say their father's boundless curiosity was integral to his business.
I keep thinking of him as a Renaissance man. You know, it just, his mind was never not trying to solve a problem in some creative way.
As children, all three Chaffees spent time in the shop with their dad.
I loved hanging out at the shop. The smells and the mysteries and the things in progress.
The rules were, don't turn anything on. You know, hammers and nails and whatever you can find in scraps, that's fine. Don't turn anything on.
But it was Hal who officially joined the business in 1982.
Hal has extraordinary social connection capabilities and is able to promote the business in ways that Dad didn't have capacity for.
After Bill Chaffee died in 1994, MBI continued its work under Hal's leadership. And trade show displays, like a 6-foot-long hot dog, an 11-foot-tall vodka bottle, and a 43-foot Eiffel Tower, became a big part of their business. But anything could happen.
And a guy had tripped on the stairs with the railings that go down, and so we made the front 10 feet of it, and so they could use it in their court case.
Your average person is most likely to encounter MBI's work at places like the Museum of Science and Industry, where they did restoration work on the Great Train Story, and Jolly Ball. In the ship's gallery, MBI created a 1:24 scale model of the schooner Charlotte Ann, based mostly on old photographs.
It was a Hanston scooter, and it had a kind of sleekness and narrowness. So I worked on getting first on that part of it, and then we had to translate that into a hull shape.
It can be very difficult to make things accurate. Part of our challenges with this particular project were in creating the Charlotte Ann schooner was getting the right drawings, the scaled drawings, the actual measurements of the ship itself, which doesn't exist anymore, as well as documents and photographs.
Now, Hal Chaffee is winding down MBI's work in preparation for his own retirement. Looking back at the business their father began, the Chaffees say his legacy remains in the details.
How many people come through here and look at the ships? Just being able to get a sense of things in imaginable scale, and then we can, in our own brains, kind of put it into perspective on how it really works in real life. Seeing things you wouldn't otherwise see in ways you wouldn't otherwise see them, and what impact did that have on all of those people.
For Chicago Tonight, this is Erica Gunderson.
One last note, the Chaffees say that while their father built the business, it wouldn't have been possible without the considerable effort of their mother, Ellen, both at the shop and at home. Up next, an unusual aquatic rescue. Stay with us. Rescuing a bald eagle under any circumstance is challenging. But rescuing a bald eagle floating on ice in open water raises the stakes significantly. But volunteers with Chicago Bird Collision Monitors proved up to the task. The bald eagle, estimated to be about 3 years old, was taken to Willowbrook Wildlife Center in DuPage County, where it became the center's first patient of 2023. WTTW News reporter Patty Wetley joins us now with more. And Patty, first of all, Happy New Year. But walk us through what happened that day on New Year's.
Right. Well, this is actually the second New Year's Day in a row that Willowbrook's first patient is a rescued eagle, bald eagle. And now is about the time that eagles can be seen in larger numbers in Illinois. This is kind of their wintering area around a lot of our waterways. And this particular eagle was not behaving normally. And it was found in Waukegan Harbor. Folks called Chicago Bird Collision Monitors, which is the best thing to do in this situation, especially with a bird like a hawk, a raptor like an eagle. You know, your average person not trained shouldn't approach or try to take care of these birds on their own. So they called in the volunteer experts who are so dedicated. They got out the right guy who had a kayak and knows how to rescue birds on water, and basically nudged the eagle on this little ice cube, shall we say, to the shore where it was pulled in with a net and was able to be transported to the wildlife center.
Yeah, and as you're talking, Patty, we're watching the video from that rescue, and you can see really just how big the bird, how big the bald eagle is next to a human. Do we know what was wrong with the eagle and how it's doing now?
Well, they tested it, and it did have some lead in its system, not enough to warrant serious high levels. Also was anemic and was showing some delay in clotting, which can indicate that it may have ingested some rat poison or rodenticide, which actually was the issue with last year's bald eagle. They still need to do some more tests to determine maybe the exact cause. It could just be an anemic bird, but it already seems to be responding well to its treatment. It ate overnight, is back to being a little feistier, which eagles are known to be. So looks like this was a good win. So fingers crossed that it will be able to be released back into the wild.
Absolutely. We hope it makes a speedy recovery. And Patty Wetley, thank you so much.
Thanks, Brandis.
And you can read Patty's full story on our website. It's all at WTTW.com/news. And now, Paris, back to you.
What a rescue. Thanks, Brandis. A stranger's gift has given a Bartlett woman a second chance at life. Reporter Joanna Hernandez has the story.
Come on, Teddy. Should we go outside? I'll get you a treat.
Vicky Strawn used to struggle taking her dog Teddy outside.
Even doing that, like coming home and doing that after transplant was therapy. Just the little things like that, you know, learning how to reuse your body again.
It's been over a year since Strawn received a life-saving heart transplant.
Typical woman, I ignored the symptoms. I didn't pay attention to my body, and that was giving me pre-warnings. And I taught preschool, so I thought, oh, I must just be getting sick, you know, from that. So I waited too long to go to the hospital, which resulted in lots of heart damage.
At the age of 51, she suffered a heart attack. Living with cardiac problems came with limitations, making it difficult to walk or cook. Strawn finally got the call she'd been waiting for more than 10 years. On May 16, 2021, she received a new heart.
I have to pinch myself, you know, just doing things. I'm like, because I used to go into the tachycardia and I thought, oh, is this going to cause me to have a problem, you know, and it just, no, I started riding a bike, a stationary bike for 7 miles, yeah.
And you weren't able to do that before?
Not at all, no.
With a new outlook on life, Strawn says the greatest gift has been meeting her granddaughter.
And seeing you now, you're taking my daughter up, changing her diaper, and
it's normal.
Yeah, pretty much.
Was all anybody could ask for, right?
For her son Nate, it's his mother's strength he says he holds on to.
The song plays and it'll hit me a certain way, but
yeah,
depends on the day and the time and the moment.
We saw Elton John over the summer. That was another milestone.
Yeah.
We got emotional because we had talked about that. Yeah.
So many what-if moments have now become a reality for the Strawn family.
And you mentioned that a day doesn't go by that you don't think about the donor.
Not a day. No, not a moment almost. No. And that's the first thing I do is I pray for them in the morning and at night. I pray for their comfort and their peace.
Vicki hasn't had the chance to meet the donor's family, but says she hopes that one day she can.
Oh, I think if I met them, I would fall to my knees. I always think that.
Strawn says she sent the donor's family a letter.
Please know that your loved one's spirit lives. They're with me in every breath I take. I promise to take care of this miraculous gift and to honor my donor every day.
Stronger than ever, Strawn says she is welcoming the new year, embracing life's big and little milestones. For Chicago Tonight, I'm Joanna Hernandez.
Okay. According to the website organdonor.gov, there are more than 100,000 people on the national transplant waiting list. And we're back to wrap things up right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
That's our show for this Tuesday night. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing. And you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news.
You can also get the show via podcast and the PBS video app. And please join us tomorrow night live at 7. Lawmakers return to Springfield amid a delayed bail reform effort. That and more in Spotlight Politics.
And what does a small Chicago museum do with a $5 million windfall? We visit Intuit, the Center for Intuitive and Outsider Art, to find out. And now for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Paris Schutz.
And I'm Brandis Friedman. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm. that is proud to be a multilingual law firm that provides translators for a variety of languages.